Is it on? Is it on? Okay, it's on. All right, I think it's 6:30. It's great to see everyone come out tonight. Thank you so much for, coming out on a dark evening in the middle of December. I really appreciate everyone's interest in this topic. So here we are tonight for our Citizens Learning Session. This is going to be an educational forum, and it's to help the citizens learn more about Chapter 40B law and the proposed affordable housing project located here in Sandwich between Route 130, Pimlico Pond Road, and Peters Pond. My name is Chris Dennis, and I'm here with Nancy Horn. She's the treasurer of Peters Pond. I'm currently the president. We are the co-founders of a 501c3 nonprofit group named Friends of Peters Pond, and we will be your hosts tonight for this meeting. Our group's mission is to protect, preserve, and advocate and educate for the health of Peters Pond. The catalyst for this citizens learning session came about from observing some recent movement by the investors to develop this large 64-acre parcel of land. From August of 2021 to present day, 2 project eligibility letters, also known as a PEL, were submitted. One was submitted for Sandwich Green and one for Village Green. All the back taxes that were owed on the property were paid in May of 2022. And just recently, the PEL application for Village Green was approved by Mass Housing on August 19th of 2022. After learning more about the size, the scope, and the proximity to the pond of this development, we became very concerned for the health of Peters Pond. And beyond the borders of our pond, citizens' concerns about the environment, our watershed, stormwater, traffic, public safety, and infrastructure came to the forefront. We knew so many of our neighbors here in Forestdale community shared our concerns, and the idea for this citizens meeting came to light. So the objective of tonight's meeting is to, 1, learn what the developer is proposing for this site per their PEL application. 2, learn where the project stands now and what the next steps for the developer will be. And 3, we're here to learn what is Chapter 40B housing law, the state statute that this developer is applying under. Here to help us tonight is Planning Board Director Ralph Attacco, Board of Health Director Dave Mason, Town Engineer Sam Jensen, and the town's Chapter 40B housing law attorney Amy Quessel. Nancy and I are grateful for their time and their expertise to educate us tonight. Please give them a warm thank you for volunteering their time to help us. As we know, one can never be too educated about these important issues and the laws that govern them. Before we start in on learning some valuable information and voicing our concerns, I'd like to hand it off to Nancy Horn, who is going to give us the agenda for this evening's meeting. Nancy, come on up.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. All right, I have some housekeeping, some light housekeeping. If you parked at the Glass Museum or the Sandwich Public Library, your car will be just fine. If you parked on the street, just use your best judgment. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Emergency exits are the door you entered through as you entered on both sides. I'm sorry. Emergency exits are as you entered through the door and the door behind me. We just need to know you to know that. The capacity of this room is 140. We cannot exceed this capacity per fire regulations. I think we still have lots of seats. Restrooms are upstairs at the top of the stairway as you enter on both sides of the room. There's another one on this side as well, and some are downstairs to the left as you entered the building. SCTV is broadcasting live and is recording. If you are watching from home, you can access the agenda under the glossary of terms on our website, Friends of Peters Pond, under Calendar. Thank you, Jeff, for putting that up for us. Okay, when you walked in, everybody received a note card and a pencil? Yes? Everybody has it? Okay, on one side, we'd love you to write your questions or comments as we go through the meeting, which you can then come up and read at the podium during the public comment time, or you can submit it to us to address later. You might think of something, and you might not want to come up, but we'll address those comments and questions. On the other side, we'd love you to please clearly write your name, address, phone number, and most importantly, email address, so we can add you to our contact list. That's the best way for us to keep in touch with you. This is our primary method of communicating with you, so it's important that you fill out your cards. At the end of the meeting, please return your cards and pencils in the basket at the back of the room. Please silence your cell phones right now. If you must take a call, please exit the meeting room. Please turn your attention to the agenda. Does everybody have an agenda? On one side, you'll find our agenda, and you'll notice the timestamps. We're going to just be really efficient tonight so we can get everything covered. And on the back, you'll see a glossary of terms. There will be several terms that you might hear for the first time, and we just want you to know what those terms mean, okay? This is good to refer to later as well. If you lose the agenda and the glossary, you can find them on our website. Thank you, Joe. Okay. We will have presentations by Chris and I, as well as by town officials. Let's honor our time together as we've all made a commitment to be present. We ask that you are quiet, which you guys are doing a great job of right now, and avoid side conversations during the meeting so we can all hear clearly. SCTV is kindly broadcasting live and recording the meeting, and we want to make sure the sound is accurate live and on the recording. Following the presentations, Chris and I will ask our panel prepared questions. Please listen carefully to these questions and responses. Next, there will be time for citizens' questions and comments. This is a time for you to use your voice. Remember, if you're thinking about something or wondering about something, many others are as well. So be brave. You will come to the podium right here. You will speak loudly and clearly, state your name and your address. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Please be respectful and do not use any profanity. Thank you for your attention and for your attendance. Let's get started.
Thank you, Ralph. So Ralph is going to start a video on the overview of the development. So I figured this would just be the easiest way to educate everyone, to just get them up to speed on the overview of what this developer is proposing right now. Thank you. Thank you, Ralph. Hey, welcome back, Friends of Peters Pond. It's Chris Dennis here. It is November 20th of 2022, and I'm going to start a video series on the Chapter 40B project that is being proposed up off of Route 130 and Pimlico Pond Road. And I want to kind of do this in small chunks. And please just kind of note that this is information. It's just information that I have come across. And if you want to do your own research, your own fact finding, please feel free to do so. All right, so to start us off, I just kind of want to give an overview of what's going on. So right now, at this time, current owners and developers, Thomas Ruhan and Jay Stinson, they are proposing to develop a 64-acre parcel located at 78 Route 130 in Sandwich, and also 55 Pimlico Pond Road as a 3-phase development. Per their project eligibility letter, which is also called a PEL, that was submitted to Mass Housing in February of 2022, Phase 1 will be 6 three-story buildings totaling 144 units with an access road at 78 Route 130. This is going to be named Village Green. Phase 3 will be 4 four-story buildings containing 240 units next to Peters Pond, named Sandwich Green. And the access road for Sandwich Green will be from 55 Pimlico Pond Road. Phase 2 is proposed to be a 5-acre, 5-megawatt solar field somewhere in between these two housing developments on this same 64-acre parcel. There is little information known right now about the exact location of the solar field. So Village Green, out near Route 130, and Sandwich Green near Peters Pond will both be large 3- and 4-story urban-style apartment building projects, of which only 20 to 25% will be affordable per Chapter 40B permitting regulations. At the moment, Phase 1, Village Green, has received approval of their PEL from Mass Housing. The next step for the developers in this Phase 1, Village Green, is to apply for a comprehensive permit with the town of Sandwich. Phase 3, Sandwich Green, has submitted a PEL to Mass Housing Partnership and received a reply from Mass Housing Partnership to make some changes and resubmit their PEL application. The Phase 2 5-acre solar field will need a special permit application with the town of Sandwich. Some of you may be wondering, what is a 40B project eligibility letter? Okay, so in order for a developer to submit an application to a municipality like Sandwich for a 40B comprehensive permit, the project must receive a determination of project eligibility from an authorized subsidizing agency such as DHCD, Mass Housing, or Mass Housing Partnership. So this is the first step for the developer to move forward with a project under Chapter 40B. I hope you guys find this helpful, and stay tuned for the next video. Please post your questions below. Okay, so that concludes the video. And if you have any questions, I just want you to think about maybe writing them down, because you'll have a moment to ask questions towards the end of the evening when we have citizens' comments. But for now, I'm going to hand this off to Ralph Fataco, the Planning Board Director, and he's going to go over some history and some permitting, education, and a few other things. Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you, Chris and Nancy, and thank you for inviting us to this, this educational opportunity for the people who surround the Forestdale Village area. Good evening. I am Ralph Fataco, Director of Planning and Economic Development for the town of Sandwich. Tonight, we will be focusing on the 40B process. Well, what is 40B? Fortunately for me, I don't have to explain it tonight because our town council, Amy Quessel from KP Law, will be doing that. But in a nutshell, 40B is the state's affordable housing law, which sets a goal of making at least 10% of every community's housing affordable. The town of Sandwich is committed to advancing affordable housing. For the longest time, our affordable stock hovered around 3.5%. Over the past 5 years, we have made some real efforts to reach the goal of 10%. In 2019, we received a grant to perform public outreach and review community design along with our local regulatory framework. In 2021, we updated our housing production plan. We have made zoning changes. We added a new accessory dwelling unit bylaw. We approved a comprehensive permit for Terrapin Ridge, which is a 30-unit development, and a few Habitat for Humanity homes. And with those efforts, our affordability stock is now up to 4.31%. When the Wing School project goes online with its 128 units, we will be at 5.8%. So I have all this talk about affordable units. Who would qualify to live in an affordable unit? On Cape Cod, as an individual, if you make less than 80% of the Barnstable County average median income, AMI, you would qualify. So what is the AMI for Barnstable County? It is an annual income of $76,100 for an individual. And 80% of that is $60,900. Imagine if your kid got a job right out of college, making $55,000 to $60,000 a year, you would be pretty happy. And guess what? They would qualify for an affordable unit if there was one available. At the 2019 public outreach we held, that is what we heard from the people in the audience. They wanted affordable places for their kids to live, or affordable places when they decide to downsize where they can move to. As I said earlier, we are here to learn about the 40B process. But I think a quick history of the Forestdale Village is a good example of how complex it can be. The project started as Forestdale Village and was awarded a comprehensive permit in 2010. The development consisted of 148 detached single-family homes over 75 acres. In 2014, the project filed for bankruptcy. In 2015, the current owners, Tom Ruhan and Jay Stinson, as Ruhan and Stinson's Realty Trust, took ownership of the project. In 2017, they transferred the rights of the comprehensive permit to Beechwood Group, LLC. Ruhan and Stinson are the principals of Beechwood Group. In April 2018, Beechwood Group petitioned the Sandwich Zoning Board of Appeals to void the comprehensive permit. The ZBA granted that request. It was the intent of the developers to start anew. Since that time, representatives of the project have made presentations to the Select Board and Planning Board on various concept developments. Also, several plans reconfiguring the lots have been submitted to the Planning Board for endorsement under the approval not required process. The developers have put forward a 3-phase project, as explained by them. And I know Chris touched on it, but I'll go over it again. The first phase, it's a little different from hers. The first phase will be a large-scale solar field on about 20 acres of the property. The second phase will be a 144-unit affordable housing development on the portion of the property closest to Route 130. And phase 3 will be a 244-unit affordable housing development on the 24 acres closest to Pimlico Pond Road and Peters Pond. I want to let everyone know that the town has not received any applications for any of the projects, and that is why we are focusing on the 40B process. The developers have filed a project eligibility letters to respective state agencies for review. And I put in here, it says, again, I'm lucky I don't have to explain what a PEL is, because Amy's going to touch on that in her presentation, but I'm going to say Chris did a very good job in explaining what a PEL is. But I'll say again, a PEL is not an approval or an application. It is a recognition by the state that the project meets minimum requirements to move ahead with the 40B process. As I was informed by Mass Housing Partnership, the PEL for the 244-unit development was incomplete and has not moved forward. Beechwood Group submitted a project eligibility letter to Mass Housing, a separate state agency, in early 2022 for the 144-unit development off of Route 130. The town reviewed the project and provided comment back to Mass Housing. We expressed concern over design, traffic, wastewater, and other regional impacts. In August, Mass Housing determined that the project appears, and this is from the letter, generally eligible under the requirements of the 40B program. This letter allows the developer to submit a comprehensive permit application to the Sandwich ZBA. The letter is good for 2 years. Again, to date, no application has been filed, so it is difficult to comment on the project, and that is why we'll be focusing on the process. And lastly, as we stated in our housing production plan, it is the town's commitment to work cooperatively with developers to create affordable housing, and I want to emphasize this, affordable housing that is respectful to the town, the surrounding neighborhoods, and the people who live there. At this point, I'm going to pass it off to our town council, Amy Quessel from KP Law. She's very versed in housing law, and she has a PowerPoint presentation to describe the 40B process. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I didn't trip over the wires, so I feel like I'm winning. Good evening. Amy Quessel from KP Law, Town Council's office. I have a brief PowerPoint that I'll go over. Hopefully, we'll address some of your questions that you may have, so we can go on. So Chapter 40B, essentially, it enables developers to get a comprehensive permit, which means that they get one permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals for their development. That means that they do not have to then go, for local bylaws, they don't have to then go to Board of Health, they don't have to go to Conservation, Planning, anything like that. The ZBA will act on the zoning issues that are raised, but also acts in place of all other local boards that will review the project from a local level. Development in a 40B is almost always at a greater density than permitted under zoning. It usually requires relief from other local bylaws as well, particularly a local wetland bylaw and Board of Health regulations. Projects are typically a mixture of market rate and below market rate housing, such as the 80% AMI, as Ralph had mentioned. So you can move on. Yeah, so Chapter 40B is Chapter 40B sections 20 to 23. It subsumes and overrides all other local permitting, regulations, and approvals, but the important part is that state laws and regulations still apply. So even though a developer will go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the local wetland bylaw, the developer still has to go to the Conservation Commission under the Wetland Protection Act. Furthermore, with Board of Health, they can go to the ZBA and get relief from local Board of Health regulations, but they cannot be relieved from Title V, which is a state act. Things that towns, can do before the application comes in, they can update their local ZBA regulations to include comprehensive permit regulations if they don't already have them. The local regulations have to be in effect on the date the application is filed. To be applied to that application. And in the comprehensive permit regulations, I always encourage a specific provision for consultant fees. That doesn't mean that the town cannot have a peer review done, but having a provision sometimes makes it easier, it's more clear. And then a filing fee. So the filing fee, it has to be comparable to fees for similar land use applications. The other thing, this is actually stuff that Ralph already touched on. Before the application, you want to engage in comprehensive planning, approved affordable housing production plan, which Sandwich has a production plan that's in place until 2027, so that's great. You want to have a master plan, open space plan, because when you're coming up with your comprehensive permit decision, you want to look at all of these things and make sure that it's in line with these things. So there's this phrase that you will hear constantly when a 40B comes in, which is consistent with local needs. So it is, a municipality is consistent with local needs if it meets certain thresholds relating to housing units and housing production. The most common are, to meet local needs, the most common is having 10% of your housing units are affordable. And again, Ralph had already touched on the affordability, it's usually 80% AMI. There are some different ones, but that's the most common one. Lower moderate income housing occupies 1.5 of the municipality's land area, and municipalities certified as being in compliance with the housing production plan. Those are the most common. They're referred to as safe harbors. These safe harbors, again, the 10% housing stocks, 1.5 land area, it's general land area minimum, so it's GLAM. There's also large-scale projects, related application, and then the planned production. So a large-scale project is over 300 units. Related application means that an application, for example, a subdivision went before the planning board and was denied, and then they immediately file for 40B. That they're not allowed to do that. So if a town is in safe harbor, it's therefore consistent with local needs, and the ZBA may deny a comprehensive permit. They can also grant it with conditions, but that decision is final, so that denial would be final if a city or town were in safe harbor. And if the municipality is not consistent with local needs or in safe harbor, the applicant then has the right to appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee, which we'll get into later. And then again, if a ZBA in a city or town that is consistent with local needs, they can still hear the project. And that's going to come up a little later, the fact that even if you have over 10%, we're still in the 2020 census, which is going to change. So, but that'll come up soon. The project eligibility letter, which has been mentioned earlier, basically the project eligibility letter lays out 3 jurisdictional requirements, which is that the applicant is a public agency, nonprofit, or limited dividend organization. The project has to be fundable by a subsidizing agency under the low or moderate income housing plan, and the applicant has to have site control, meaning the applicant has to own it, the applicant has to have a purchase and sale, something along those lines. The contents of the application for the project eligibility letter, the contents of the application go to the subsidizing agency. Notice is then sent to the chief executive, which is the select board. There's a comment period, it's usually 30 days, that can be extended. There's a site visit from the either Mass Housing Partnership or Mass Housing or DHCD, whichever entity they applied to. The project eligibility letter is not appealable, and it is conclusive as to those 3 jurisdictional items that I mentioned on the previous slide. So the application for a comprehensive permit, meaning the required contents, they have to submit plans, they have to submit narratives, things like that, but they are only required to submit preliminary plans. They don't have to submit final construction plans. There's a filing fee. The filing fee must be paid in full with the application. If the applicant feels that the filing fee is too high, they can't simply not pay it. They can contest it, but they still have to pay it first. And there has to be a waiver list. The waiver list is a waiver of all of the local rules and regulations and bylaws that they are asking to be waived. And I can tell you that waiver list constantly changes during the project because things change, but they have to submit at least one with the application. The project typically needs relief from provisions of zoning and other local bylaws. They submit the waiver list. The ZBA will, and I'm missing an L there, I'm sorry. The ZBA will receive comments from other boards on the waiver requests. So for example, comments from Conservation, whether to waive a provision of the wetland bylaw. The ZBA is not required to grant a waiver or other local regulations, but may do so if it would be consistent with local needs. The ZBA is not required to grant a waiver of any bylaw or other local regulations if, but for the waiver, the project would not be rendered uneconomic. So if there's a waiver request that's denied, or there's a condition that's put into the decision that the developer feels would make the project uneconomic, that is a reason for them to appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee. So for a public hearing, once an application comes in, the notices are the same as Chapter 40A, Section 11, meaning it's published in the newspaper twice. There's an abutter list. It's posted at Town Hall. The abutter list is abutters to abutters within 300 feet, abutters and abutters to abutters within 300 feet. And then there's, in the regulations, under 760 CMR 56, there's other provisions that apply only to comprehensive permits. And those are that you have to send a notice and a copy of the application to all local boards within 7 days, and you do that seeking comment from the local boards. You open the public hearing within 30 days, and then you have to close the public hearing within 180 days of opening the public hearing. You want the opening the public hearing within 30 days and closing the public hearing within 180 days. If you do not do that, you are subject to constructive approval. And then you also would want to, once the applicant comes in, the zoning board would want to schedule a site visit. So you have the 180 days, and then you have, after the ZBA closes the hearing, there's 40 days to issue a decision. You then file that with the town clerk within 14 days, and you forward a copy to DHCD. Those extensions, such as the 30, or those time limits, such as the 30 days, the 180 days, and the 40 days, can be mutually extended. They should always be extended in writing, and that extension should be filed with the town clerk. So with regard to 40Bs and other large projects in town, outside consultants are very important. The ZBA is empowered to require the payment for third-party consultant reviews for any aspect of the project that the board believes is relevant, other than legal services, unfortunately. So you can have a peer reviewer. They review comments. They review and comment on the applicant's submittals. They don't generate independent reports. They simply take in what the applicant has provided and they comment on it. And the statute that allows cities and towns to do this is Chapter 44, Section 53G. So it authorizes the town to hire somebody. That person works for the town, but they are paid by the applicant. So the applicant, what happens is a proposal comes in, the applicant puts that amount in a special fund, and then that fund, it's drawn, the money is taken out of that fund. The applicant cannot object to the choice of consultant unless they claim that the consultant is not qualified or has a conflict of interest. So for a decision, the Zoning Board of Appeals can approve with conditions, or deny. The standard, again, is reasonable. You have to be reasonable and consistent with local needs. There's a balancing test that the Housing Appeals Committee does, and Superior Court, and is the balancing test. It's, does the need for affordable housing outweigh valid planning objections to the details of the proposal, such as health, open space, safety, and open space again, sorry. And there's a strong presumption of housing. So it's a tough one. And so the other aspect of a 40B is that you have to apply the requirements and regulations have to be equally applied to market rate projects and affordable projects. So for example, you cannot require a 40B project to upgrade your infrastructure unless you've required a market rate project to do that, which is unlikely. The obligation for 10% affordable housing is not going to go away. So as Ralph already went into is that, doing exactly what Sandwich is doing will help get to the 10%. Housing production plans, bylaw changes, things like that. And then you want to use comments from local officials, peer review, and residents to address these local issues and concerns with bylaw changes, things like that. And then the other thing, with your decision, you want to request appropriate mitigation. So conditions, so there's, as I stated on the last slide, you can either approve with conditions, or deny. Most 40B projects are approved with conditions. So the conditions cannot invade the jurisdiction of the subsidizing agency, meaning we cannot require a different kind of affordable housing agreement, or a regulatory agreement, or deed rider, things like that. That's all on the subsidizing agency side. An uneconomic condition is any condition brought about by a single factor or combination of factors that makes it impossible for a public agency or nonprofit organization to proceed in building or operating low or moderate income housing without financial loss, or for a limited dividend organization to proceed and still realize a reasonable return. That's the definition. Essentially, a developer will claim that a reduction in units makes the project uneconomical. A requirement of, sometimes a requirement of an on-site treatment, wastewater treatment plant, things like that will make the project uneconomic. There's infrastructure concerns, and also the decrease in units must be for valid planning health reasons. They can't just be because it's simply too dense. So for appeals, the appeal goes to, the applicant can appeal a denial or an approval with conditions to the Housing Appeals Committee. And then abutters or other aggrieved parties, they appeal to, under 40A, Section 17, to Superior Court or Land Court. Often, after a comprehensive permit is granted, the developer will come in for a modification. There's a written notice to the board. The board determines, within 20 days, the board has to determine if it's substantial or insubstantial. If it's substantial, the board has to let the applicant know in writing, and then a public hearing has to occur within 30 days with full notice under 40A Section 11. So it's kind of like the process starts again, but the zoning board can only review the change, the modification. They can't go back and look at the whole project over again. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you to Ralph and Amy for the overview of this proposed development, the history of the property and project, and the education on Chapter 40B law. Next, Chris and I will ask the panel prepared questions covering the most common questions. We'll do that from over here.
Yeah.
Okay, right there. All right. Okay. I'm gonna start with just a local zoning, and I think it might be helpful if either Amy or Ralph could just give a little bit more of an explanation of local zoning and how we are all privy to local zoning and what that means, and what a waiver would be from local zoning that a developer would be asking for an example.
Well, all of our zoning bylaws are in the Sandwich zoning bylaw, which is accessible to everyone. We could have a printed copy, or if you go on the town website, it's on there. A lot of times when developers are seeking waivers, those waivers are for density.
Ralph, can you speak up a little? I'm sorry. A little louder.
Did you get the text from Sandwich?
Yes.
Okay. So what happens is As you know, generally speaking, in the town of Sandwich, in residential areas, lots are either 40,000 square feet, which is approximately an acre, one single-family home, or 60,000, depending on the residential district they're in, and 60,000 is an acre and a half. We do allow multifamily housing, and a lot of times that's what the waiver is for, to put more people on that same area which we would typically put one single family home. So.
Okay, thank you. This next question, probably for Mr. Dave Mason, Board of Health. Per the PEL applications, it states that a development such as Village Green would have a wastewater output of about 20,000 gallons per day, and Sandwich Green has an output of almost 40,000 gallons per day. Who researches and advises the developer on the type of septic system that they would need to handle this much wastewater? And the second part of the question would be, can you explain a little bit more about the permitting process that a developer must go through in order to obtain a wastewater permit for a complex that would be this size?
Okay, so per the state DEP requirements, any total flow of wastewater over 10,000 gallons per day requires a groundwater discharge permit. And there is a regulation in place, 314 CMR 5, which outlines the process by which an applicant needs to proceed in order to properly permit such a facility with DEP. The first step in that process is to submit a hydrogeological evaluation of the property, and the intent of that is for the information supplied to DEP to look at and determine whether and what impacts there are to the groundwater and groundwater supply for public drinking water purposes. Given a large majority of the Cape is a Zone 2, which does supply groundwater for public drinking water purposes, and they'd be looking at what potential impacts of that. As far as the first part of your question, who researches and advises the developer, that would be the developer's consultant in conjunction with DEP in order to determine, what type of system is necessary to meet the groundwater discharge standards for this facility. Also, this facility is located within an impaired watershed, so the state would be looking at that also. The impaired watershed that this site is in is within Pompanesett Bay, and currently we have a standing intermunicipal agreement with Mashpee and Barnstable with regards to how we will handle our nitrogen and responsibility of such in the future for the cleaning up of Pompanesett Bay. As far as the permitting process, again, I mentioned they'd be going through the groundwater discharge permit program in which the process is evaluated by DEP's technical staff. And that, again, that would be for the entire property. I know there's different parcels out there, but they're all under some form of similar ownership, and they would all be subject to the groundwater discharge permit process.
Thank you, Dave. There has been much confusion about this question that I'm going to ask, so for clarity, I'm going to repeat the question. It was covered in part of the presentation, but let's just review it one more time. Chapter 40B states that at least 20 to 25% of the units must be deemed affordable. Please define affordability in Barnstable County and discuss who is eligible. Thank you.
As I had mentioned, affordability for subsidized housing inventory is based on the area median income. In the project eligibility letters that the applicants, that the developers put forward, they were looking at an AMI of 80%. And again, as I had expressed it in my what I had said, that would be an annual income of $60,900. There are other project affordable eligibilities, whether it's 30% of AMI, 50% of AMI, 80% of AMI. I focused on the 80% because that's what was articulated in the project eligibility letters.
Thank you. So this question is also for Dave. Will there be an environmental impact study? Who is responsible, and what will this entail?
As far as an environmental impact study, that I'm sorry. Yeah, that would be MEPA through the the permitting process.
Can you explain what MEPA acronym stands for?
Oh, good.
Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act.
I'll just repeat that because I don't know if it, Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act.
Correct, and MEPA is not a permitting division. It's it offers a review to the public and to agencies to review large-scale projects.
Okay. Thank you.
Sam, one of the concerns we have, especially as Friends of Peters Pond, is stormwater runoff. Can you please explain what stormwater is and some examples of how roadways and parking lots properly dispose of it, and why is this important for this particular project?
Sure. So stormwater runoff is excess precipitation, either through rainfall or excess snow melt that can cause a lot of problems if it's not properly managed. And basically through flooding of roadways, adjacent property, erosion problems that can impact local adjacent water bodies, and also stormwater can carry waterborne pollutants that it may pick up along the way. So water quality can also be an issue. If a project comes through as a subdivision, then the subdivision rules and regulations come into effect, and we in the engineering department would review the project under those rules. Those require across the site management of the 100-year storm, as it's called, which is a statistical precipitation event. It's a very large amount of stormwater. That is like a theoretical, close to a maximum that one would expect in any given time frame. It's a large amount of stormwater, provides an engineering standard for which to evaluate a stormwater system. That is particularly helpful for looking at flooding and large-scale drainage impacts, also for erosion, and how stormwater is managed on large volume events. Water quality, on the other hand, is something that is looked at on smaller storm events. And so there's different standards that apply for water quality treatment. We typically look at what's known as a water quality volume, which is roughly equivalent to a 1 inch of runoff. So it's a much smaller storm. But what science has shown us is that the smaller, more frequent storms typically carry a larger portion of the annual pollutant load. And so those storms are more important to target for water quality improvements. And so there's smaller features, smaller treatment systems that should be integrated into a design for a site that would handle lesser portions of the flow, but would help to improve water quality on an annual basis. Some of those features may include site infiltration, bioinfiltration, bioretention systems, things like that. These types of treatment technologies are all defined in various references, but there's the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook is a specific standard that we typically turn to for engineering guidance. And that standard is then it's in turn referenced by the subdivision rules and regulations and other regulations that may come into effect. So it's a common source for engineering standards.
On that same subject, so would the developer be responsible to hire a professional to design the stormwater runoff, and then does the town have someone that does some checks and balances to make sure that that stormwater design is in line with all of the regulations?
Yes, as part of an application, there is a requirement that engineered drawings and design documents be submitted. Depending on the process that's followed and how the application comes through, whether it's a subdivision submitted, it would be looking for conformance with under the subdivision rules and regulations, or if it's a multifamily housing that's not necessarily a subdivision, we'd just be looking specifically under the zoning requirements. Either way, we're going to be looking for a licensed registered professional engineer to be responsible for the design of the stormwater in consistency with the Massachusetts stormwater standards.
Thank you.
So just a follow-up question for stormwater runoff. You know, knowing the condition of Peters Pond and Mashpee Wakeby, our neighbors, and the whole, Pompanesett Bay watershed, how can we, with projects like this, if it is approved, ensure that we are using modern technology, things like permeable surfaces or, more green design, to make sure that we're keeping that stormwater on the property as much as possible versus going right into the ground and into our water bodies?
Sure. Well, that gets into design review. In my department, we oftentimes get involved with technical review. In this case, this would be expected to be a larger submittal, and a peer review, as was previously mentioned, that may come into play. So there would be a process to vet a potential peer reviewer, which would be a qualified registered professional engineer that would work on behalf of the town, to then review all the documents and make sure and provide an opinion back to the town through the zoning board of appeals as to the consistency with standards, including water quality standards.
If I may just follow up on what Sam was saying, is that just a reminder that stormwater regulations, if they fall under state regulations, they have to be followed. If any local regulations associated with stormwater, the applicant would have to request a waiver, which would be reviewed, and at that point, with the help of our engineering department and the consultant, we would review the waiver and see if it's consistent with our local goals to maintain water quality.
Thank you.
Okay, and our last question that we have is about traffic. I'm assuming there would, in a development such as this size, there would have to be a traffic study. And who would do the traffic study, and who is responsible for funding that study, and what does that study entail? Does anyone on the panel want to give a shot at that? Thank you.
So the applicant will submit a traffic study, usually with their application, if not shortly thereafter. So they will have a traffic engineer, they will submit a traffic study. The board will then hire a traffic peer reviewer, and that peer reviewer would report to the board after the review of the traffic study.
Okay, so just so I understand, that it would be on the responsibility of the developer to hire a professional to do the traffic study, and then there's a review done by the town?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, panel. This is great. We're running great on time. We have even more time for citizens' comments, so I'm really hoping all of you came prepared. We will next have a time of open mic for the public comment. You can ask a question or give comment. I remind you to use your time wisely and please be respectful. When you come up to the podium, please loudly and clearly state your name and address. We were going to say 2 minutes, but let's say 4 because we have lots of time. So anybody can come on up and we're ready for you. Oh, just come on up here. Thank you.
Alan Randall, 20 Jeannie's Way. Surely. Alan Randall, 20 Jeannie's Way. I have a question about when we do they apply for the comprehensive permit and for the wastewater treatment permit. Are they including all 3 phases of their development? Are they required to do that? And are you required to look at that even if they do not?
Yeah, with regards to the wastewater, DEP would require to have an understanding of the development plan and how to design accordingly for that.
That would be all 3 phases?
They would probably be looking, DEP would be looking at a system to design, to accommodate all 3, because they'd be looking at the total flow anticipated for the development.
And would that be true for traffic, when you're looking at the traffic study?
So traffic's a little bit different than wastewater because, for example, here it looks like the wastewater, each phase is triggering the wastewater that's going to go, it's now going to go into 314 CMR 5, meaning they have to do a wastewater treatment plant. So it's in their best interest to do one.
Yes.
So with traffic, it's a little bit different. Here, normally I would say no, that you would only have to look at the one phase that's in the zoning board would simply just look at the phase in front of them. However, here they have already applied for a PEL for phase 3, I guess, for phase 3.
Right.
So I think the zoning board here would have a little bit more leeway.
But I thought the phase 3 was not approved yet.
Correct, but they have applied for it, so it is out there. We know what they're thinking about.
Right.
It's not as if they're coming in with one application for phase 1 and nothing else, and they haven't said a word about what else is going to be done. And of course, when the zoning board asks them, they say, we don't know. That's not the case here.
Okay. So what you're saying now is that even though they haven't necessarily applied for phase 3 yet, under the comprehensive permit, you would still look at that?
They haven't applied for any comprehensive permits.
Oh, but
That's my
if
understanding.
Came in with a comprehensive permit for phase 1 only. Would you be able to and legally look at phase 3 as for traffic and for runoff and for other effects that this development could do?
I think that in this case, you could, because there is a PEL that has been applied for. They have represented to Mass Housing Partnership what their plans are for phase 3.
Right. So legally, you believe we would be on good ground to object to things and to require requirements for things that would happen in phase 3 that would make a much larger impact on traffic and on wastewater, runoff and other effects of what they're doing on that property.
Runoff is different because runoff depends on a much more detailed plan, such as permeable surfaces, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I don't know if that could come in to play. If only phase 1 phase 2, phase 1 solar. So if only phase 2 comes in, then I don't know how you could assess impacts just from stormwater, because we don't know the sidewalks, we don't know parking areas, things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. We're ready for you. Yep, come on up.
Hi, Casey Poon, 25 Anchor Drive. Wondering if you could give some more clarity about these authorized subsidizing agencies. Chris mentioned 3 of them, DHCD, Mass Housing, and Mass Housing Partnership. Why are there 3 state agencies? Are they all really state agencies? And then why would the same developer apply to one agency for one phase of it and a different agency for another phase?
So DHCD is a state agency. Mass Housing and Mass Housing Partnership are quasi-state agencies. And I would assume that it's whatever program the developer is applying under is how they would choose what agency to apply to.
Okay, so when you say program, are these agencies literally subsidizing the units that are affordable?
Sometimes they are. Sometimes it's the New England Fund. It's other.
Okay, but it's not the market units that are subsidizing the affordable units.
No, that would be up to the applicant, I guess. The one thing that we don't see the projected numbers or anything with regard to their finances unless during the hearing process the applicant alleges that something will make the project uneconomic. We can then dive into their pro forma in that case only.
But the projected numbers were in the PELs, right? For the
I mean the units?
Yeah, the rental rates.
Yes, those are, definitely.
But you don't know if, like, how the affordable units are going to be subsidized specifically.
They're subsidized through the affordable and low-income housing programs that the DHCD essentially run.
Okay, so the affordable units will be subsidized by these subsidizing agencies. Is that correct?
There are several financing mechanisms to subsidize for housing. One of them, it could be grants, it could be low-income loans through the subsidizing agencies. It could be tax income credits where the developer could go out into the we'll call it the marketplace and sell them and raise cash to do that. So it's not an easy answer, and I do apologize that we can't really give you a straight answer because we don't know what vehicle they're going to use to subsidize the housing. Part of it is part of the subsidizing of the project is the density. And the density, allows more units to go in, and that's why they could offer 20 to 25% of the units at less than market rate. So there are a lot of tools that go into play when developers look at financing a project.
So these units could be subsidized by public funds or private funds.
It could be, yeah.
All right, thank you.
So the other thing to remember too is that a developer is limited with their profits. They're limited to 20% profit.
20% profit over the cost of the whole development.
Correct.
And the affordable units are going to cost more than the rates that will be charged the affordable units. Is that an accurate statement?
The affordable units have to be equal to the market rate units.
In terms of cost or in terms of?
In terms of how they're constructed,
okay.
They have to be absolutely equal to market rate units.
Right, but my question
So
is,
I don't know the answer to your question because, again, we don't know how they're being funded. I guess if it was, say it's funded straight, then that means that, I guess, yes. But we don't know if there's grants. We don't know if they're doing tax credits. It's impossible for us to know. That's the developer. Once the developer gets a PEL, then they can come to the ZBA. They sort all that out prior to getting a PEL.
so the only requirement for them to be affordable is that they're 20% below market.
No, they have to be 20 to 25% of the development has to be affordable units.
Right,
which are eligible to people that are 80% AMI.
But I'm talking about the rents that are charged. The rents that are charged are going to, the requirements for the affordable are 20% below the market rates, right?
No, I'm not gonna give that general number because the DHCD sets the number. It sets the number what an individual pay, a two-person household, 4-person household. So DHCD sets the rate, the rental rate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Casey.
Good evening, and thank you for taking comments tonight. My name is Susan Dangle. I'm not a resident of Sandwich. I'm a resident of Mashpee. I live on 762 Cotuit Road on Wakeby Pond. I'm the president of Save Mashpee Wakeby Pond Alliance and keenly interested in clean water and the impact of this development on wastewater and what's happening to Mashpee Wakeby Pond, which is virtually eutrophic at this point. It also is located, as is the site, in the northern part of the watershed of Pompanesett Bay. And in the letter that the Select Board of Sandwich sent to the developer, it clearly states that this project should be no net nitrogen development in order to adhere to the MOU signed with Mashpee. I do believe that Mashpee Select Board this week became aware of this project and are going to be writing a letter of concern to the town of Sandwich with regard to the project. So given the DEP Title V proposed changes that are being commented on until December 16th, it does appear that this will be very stringent in its requirements for what we will need to do for this project. I think the other two gentlemen asked the questions that I had on my little card, but does Mashpee have any say in this project at all, based on the MOU?
When we receive the comprehensive permit application, we do send letters to included on the abutters list are people within 300 feet of the project and the adjoining towns. So a public hearing notice would go to the planning office of the Mashpee Planning Office, and at that point, if the town of Mashpee wishes to weigh in, they are free to do so.
Okay, and I think just a follow-up to the prior question was about the two different organizations that are looking at these projects, but they are not showing the entirety to these housing organizations. You all know it, but it doesn't appear as though that is being presented to those organizations in full. Would that have any say in their decision-making if they knew the whole story?
They are, as I'm aware of it, they are aware of the full story, and the response letter that came from the Sandwich Selectman's office to Mass Housing did indicate that it's a 3-phase project, and did make mention of the I believe it made mention of the PEL that went to MHP regarding the 240 units and the potential solar field. So.
Okay,
And that's, and again, I apologize for cutting you off, and that's why we did express that it's important to look at this project in its entirety, specifically as it relates to wastewater.
and so that letter was to Mass Housing, but has there been a similar correspondence with Mass Housing Development? What's the other one?
We CC'd them. We CC'd, yeah.
Okay, let me just look at my last. Oh, and is the traffic study being conducted in the summer? Is that a requirement?
Yeah, that.
Is it a
Well, I don't know.
requirement? It's a big deal.
Yeah, and you know, I do have to say that that our board reviews it other than common sense prevailing as to looking at when the traffic study is our consultant, if we get a consultant to review it, I'm sure that would be one of the questions that are asked.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Sue. Who's coming up?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ron Semprini. I'm a recent transplant of the town of Barnstable, where I sat on government study for 3 years and was vice president of the licensing board before I left, where any project that came in front of us or any business we had to review thoroughly. And I'm just looking for clarification this evening. I've done a little bit of homework, and if someone could explain the developers that are involved now, were they the original developers on the project that was proposed back in the middle 2000s, where from my understanding, there was quite a project proposed for affordable housing, retail shops, housing for homeless vets, and regular housing. And I understand that that project did go into receivership. And with the developers that are involved now, were they involved in that original development? And does anybody have any understanding of why it went into receivership? And is there anything legally pending that might prevent this project from going forward? Thank you.
The Ruin and Stinson, I could say, were involved. That the original project was called Forestdale Village on the periphery, in that they were the financing. They helped provide financing for the original project. So when it went into receivership, that's how they took ownership of the project.
And were there more than one party involved in that, developers, or were there other parties involved?
To the best of my recollection, no.
Okay. And just one more follow-up. I know in the town of Barnstable, as every town in the Cape, trying to meet the 10% quota, we've had quite a few projects that have been built in the last few years, and they've been done in phases where they have met the 10% requirement of that particular development, a project, I should say, but they've been going in thirds. And some of the projects have been halted because of the fact of the rentals, even though it's market value, are still really unattainable and unaffordable for many people. Price ranging from anywhere from $2,300 to $3,000 a month. And what would happen if something of this phase went into effect, where all of a sudden you found out that the rents or what am I trying to say? Some of the rents were not being met, and a lot of places were being left vacant.
Yeah, that's a good question, and we had the town had made a comment to the mass housing in the project eligibility letter response, in that that we suggested a market analysis be performed that they could support 144 units.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roger. Who's next? I'm sorry, did you say Robert? Rod. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Andrew DeMarco. I live at 70 Route 130. I have a question about the 10% rule. Is that for our permanent residents, or is that for any homeowner in the town?
It's based on year-round housing, and it's based on the 2010 census. So that number will change once the 2020 census comes out. I know it sounds weird, 2022, the 2020 census, but it's going to come out. And once that comes out, the year-round housing again will change, and then the 10% number will change.
Okay. I also have a question about the infrastructure that's already been installed on the property. The sewer drain systems, the freshwater systems that have already been installed, fire hydrants that have not been inspected because there were not permits. How would they now properly inspect?
and I think, Sam, you could help me out with this one. I know they're on the property, but I don't think anything has been installed
They have been installed.
all installed or inspected. The only installation I know is the water main line that they did in conjunction with the Sandwich Water District. So if the Sandwich Water District, if they have fire hydrants, they're the ones who they would done the inspection. We didn't, and I sorry for putting this on you, Sam, but other than that, I don't know if they've pulled any permits. I know that they went to the water district. The water district lines went in, and I'm assuming they're the fire hydrants, which are part of the water district. So the rest of Sam, do you know anything else?
Yeah, the infrastructure that's out there, as far as my department goes, in engineering, we were not invited to inspect those systems. And so they would, if those are elements that they want to incorporate into the new work that's going to be permitted, then they'd have to prove to us that it meets the conditions of the permit and whatever standards are applicable.
So within those conditions, would you be allowing photographs? Would it have to be a visual inspection by yourself or one of your team of all of the connections?
Can't really say right now, sitting here at this microphone right here. We'd have to go out and look at it and make a determination.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Who's ready?
So my name's Don Clay. I live on Park Road in Mashpee, right along the border of the project. I just want to expand on the question that he had a few minutes ago. So some water lines were put on that property. Were they done under permit? They weren't inspected? There was no permits. There's no site plan. There's no subdivision plan that they were working under?
I can't speak to the water lines because the water infrastructure is under the jurisdiction of the Sandwich Water District. As far as drainage goes, that's something that a property owner can do themselves at risk.
Okay.
It was the drainage that may or may not have been installed on that property. Like I mentioned, I'm not aware of it being installed under a permit. You know, we were not advised that it was being installed under a permit, and we in the engineering department, so we were not given the opportunity to come out and inspect it.
Okay, so looking at the satellite plan that was up there earlier, there was a large section of that property that was cleared, probably several acres. At what point would it trigger some sort of review by the town on land clearing or sediment barriers or runoff?
Right, that really comes down to a zoning question, and then that goes back to the building department.
You know, our building commissioner went out there and took a look, and it didn't rise to the threshold. There was a certain percentage that it didn't meet at the time. So,
what is that threshold? Is it? My understanding was it was anything more than 1 acre required some sort of subdivision or site planning and erosion control by state regulations.
yeah. No, I would, that one I don't have a solid answer for you. I don't really know the answer to it, so I could take a look at it, and if you give I know I have your email address, and I could get the answer to you.
So council had a comment. Was it anything over 1 acre? Is that correct?
Anything over an acre disturbance is subject to NIPDs.
Okay.
Which is a federal permit, which is, I mean, they just have to apply under the
Right.
NOI. So it's pretty, they might have done it. We don't.
Okay.
But it's not, that's not a permit that we administer or do any inspections on. Under the federal construction permit.
Okay, so it's not filed with the state. I'm sorry, it is filed with the state.
It's filed with the EPA, a federal agency.
Okay.
Right. So
I can find that out if I do some digging.
You could. It is online.
Okay. How about a project like that with sedimentation control for stormwater runoff and things like that? Because we're on the bottom of that hill, and there's a large amount of runoff that comes off that hill, and it's quite brown these days, so it's definitely coming from that property. So who do I work with in the town to take a look at that? And maybe the next rain storm we have this week will be a good week.
I know the building commissioner had gone out there and had spoken to, was last summer they were doing some clearing. I know they put hay bales up, but I will alert him again to go out there and take a look at it.
There are no hay bales. So.
Yeah, okay.
And just another couple of questions. On these units, are they rental units? Are they ownership units? Are they, is it workforce housing? Is it, you know?
As they put forward in their project eligibility letters, it's 100% rental.
Okay, okay. And you did say that there was an A&R on the property or several A&Rs filed. Did they separate these parcels into each segment, or is it just some other rearranging of the property?
Well, yeah, I could go back to the original comprehensive permit with 148 units. So there were approximately 170, 180 separate acres as a result of that comprehensive permit. So what they were doing A&Rs to sort of reconfigure those lots into larger lots. So, yeah, so I think they have the front portion, if I remember correctly, are 2 7-acre lots, and there's a 20-acre lot, and then a 24-acre lot. If I remember the A&Rs.
Okay, so there's a good possibility there'll be some more subdivision up there for each project, or is all this project now in one contiguous property?
It's all 64 acres are under the sole ownership of Ruin and Stinson, whether it's their realty trust or Route 130 LLC. So at that point, we see what the determination is.
Okay. How about, and one other thing for that property, has an endangered species survey been done on that land, or is it something the town can do? Because I know that we've found box turtles in that area, for one thing, after a heavy storm washing down from there, so that it's territory.
That's a good question. I know at the original comprehensive permit from early 2007, 2008 when it started, they were requested to do that study, but I had looked at the state website, and that is not listed as an endangered species area, so it's not mapped for it. So
is that something the town could require the owner to do prior to construction?
What to do what? I'm sorry.
Or an endangered
species survey.
Oh, no, that would be under, so that would be under conservation, under the Wetland Protection Act.
So through Concom, through Sandwich?
Yeah,
Okay.
Only under the Wetland Protection Act, which doesn't necessarily require a habitat study. But again, if there's listed species, then they would go under Natural Heritage or MISA, which is a state agency. But if they're not listed, possibly the Wetland Protection Act might be able to cover it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you all for coming, by the way. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Don. We're ready for you. Come on up.
Mike Randall, 24 Quaker Meeting House. Hopefully these are fair questions and a little less on the process, more about the specifics. There was a artist rendering done that showed the 240 units. It was a pond view looking up the hill where you could see these buildings towering over the trees. And I remember when there was a proposed development in the so-called Golden Triangle, and there was issues about the height of the buildings. So I don't know if we know, the rendering indicated it was about 50 feet from ground level to the tops of these buildings. As preliminary as this data is, do we know whether or not that 50 feet will require a waiver, or do the existing zoning allow for something of that height?
Yeah, no, zoning in the R2 is 35 feet, so it would require a waiver.
When the waivers are requested and given, are they specific to that development? So in other words, it doesn't by default mean now that, okay, anybody who wants to put a 50-foot building in town can do so.
Right, it's specific to the development within the comprehensive permit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second question has to do with the units themselves. I don't know whether it was in any other materials, but are these all one-bedroom units, two-bedroom units, a mixture? Do we know that yet?
Yeah, just from the project eligibility letter that was submitted, there's a mixture of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms.
Oh, and 3 bedrooms.
Yeah, I believe as a part of DHC, they have to have a few 3 bedroom, a certain percentage has to be
10%
3.
under the DHCD guidelines.
So the 20 to 25%, does that apply to 144, for example, or does that go 20% of the 1 bedroom, 20% of the 2 bedroom?
Yep.
Okay. Lastly, the question is related to the number of bedrooms, because you can extrapolate the number of people, maybe families that are going to have children that are going to require, to be added to our school roles. So will the town consider, I haven't done the math, even though that's what I did for 35 years before retiring, but I'm sure there'll be an impact requiring us to hire teachers or expand the size of classrooms, et cetera. Is that going to be, part of the downstream consideration as to an impact to the town?
So unfortunately, Chapter 40B specifically states that the Zoning Board of Appeals cannot consider impacts to schools or municipal services.
I see. But what about, I did see something that was related to public safety. So for instance, is our existing fire services capable of servicing, if all those buildings were fully occupied, will we have enough equipment, enough people, et cetera, to be able to service that if necessary? Would that be something that could be considered?
So equipment would be considered, personnel cannot, but, so for example, 50 feet, you said the building was, the building's 50 feet. Yeah, so you have to, part of the local boards that the application is sent to, the fire department, police, they're one of them. So it will be sent to the the fire department, to determine if they have apparatus to reach the top of a 50-foot building. The other thing that is also reviewed, they come in with a fire, a turning plan, to make sure that the largest fire truck in Sandwich can get around the site. So those are things that can be considered. These would all be sprinklered, obviously.
Yeah. Yep.
And I could just say, as anecdotally, when we worked with the developers of the wing school, we went through that process during the comprehensive permit process. We did, and they're going to be 3-story buildings, I think just slightly over the 35-foot height threshold. We sat down with the fire department. They went over turning radiuses. They went over where they could put a ladder truck, and the developers made accommodations because I think it works. When they put the ladder up, they put the jacks out, so they want to make sure where they put the jacks out, there's solid ground. So I could say anecdotally, when we work with the developers of the wing school, that was an extremely serious consideration, and that was that they made, that they put in their plan design.
Okay. One more question, I promise. So I'm not sure if this is a fair question or comment, but are aesthetics part of the consideration for zoning? I mean,
Yeah, we did.
This is my opinion. I don't want to be canceled or anything, but those buildings. I mean, I watched as the complexes developed down by the corner of Catuit and Quaker Meeting House, including the senior center, and I like those. I think they're Cape Cod-y. These, however, are just plain, yeah. So
I
assume it's you know, it's very preliminary and there's going to be comments, but I was just curious whether aesthetics, you know, does it fit within the, you know, the town? I know it's not a historical district, so you can't rely on that. But,
I just want to say if the selectmen's response to the PEL did bring up design considerations. It was brought up that the people associated with this project had done a similar project, I believe, in Lexington, and the buildings look more in line with what we would expect to see on Cape Cod. Additionally, when we received that 2019 grant, again, there was design considerations. We had Union Studios come down, and we did share that survey with the developer, saying, and you know, we had 2 sessions up here with 50, 60 people each session, saying what they would like multifamily buildings to look like. So we have shared that with the developers.
and still they submitted this. It's okay.
It looks standard, but again, it's preliminary. That's the project eligibility letter they put in August. So
Understood. Thank you very much for your time. And
Thank you very much, Mike.
Okay, Amy, when you answer a question, can you just pull your mic closer? Because I think SCTV is having a hard time hearing. Thank you.
Good evening, Robert George, 401 Service Road. A lot of talk tonight here on a lot of different things. I haven't heard anything on septic. The selectmen who looked at this project, there was talk of a septic treatment plant for this area. I've heard nothing on that tonight. Is that still going to be in effect? We have 384 units, probably 2 people in each unit. You're talking a lot of crap going in the ground. Basically, true. So, do they have to build a septic treatment plant?
Yeah, at the beginning we had questions regarding that in the process. It is over the threshold of 10,000 gallons per day, which requires a groundwater discharge permit from DEP. So the process will be through DEP for the design and approval of the treatment plant.
Okay, so I just wondered, is that cost prohibitive? That's a lot of money. So, the other thing, a traffic study. Are they required to do a traffic study? Do we know what this project's going to do to that area for traffic?
So they're not necessarily required to do a traffic study pursuant to the regulations, but the Zoning Board of Appeals will certainly require that they do a traffic study.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing with the police and the fire, the impact on that. I did 48 years in the fire department, and we were busy then. We're terribly busy now, the guys are. We do not have a ladder truck that's 100 foot anymore. They've downsized. All we have now is straight sticks. We do not have the type of bucket on the end. We had the condo fire over here years ago, and we pulled a gentleman off the 3rd floor, put him in the bucket and got him on the ground, and he lived. Today we do not have a bucket truck. We just have a straight stick, and that's down to 85 feet, I think. So it's going to put some hardship on the fire and police. I think before, in different projects, we've addressed
the petitioner to add extra manpower onto the police and fire department and pay for a couple extra firemen or policemen, subsidize that for, say, 5 to 10 years. I hate to tell you what's going to happen when these units get full, and the fire department is really busy now, and you think what's going to happen when these units come in with the manpower they got. I don't think they're going to be able to handle it. If we have another COVID rise, they were out straight, couldn't get anybody to work. Guys were overworked, and you put, 700, 800 people in these units, they're going to need some help. So we talk waivers, they might need a waiver. If they want a waiver, then we can make some requirements, hopefully, that they would step up and subsidize the police and fire for several years to address the issues of these people in here, that we can handle it. So, is that possible? Legally?
I think as Amy expressed earlier, that we can address, the comprehensive permit doesn't allow the addressing of personnel issues, subsidizing personnel issues.
Yep. Okay, I just hope that all happens, that it doesn't get overlooked. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Hi, Tony Hylinski, 2 Lichen Lane. In addition to be a Forestdale resident, I'm also the airport manager out on Joint Base Cape Cod. So this project is about 1,000 feet west of my final approach course on runway 23. There are federal guidelines about building high-density projects. That's why you don't see like football stadiums built on close proximity to airports. There's also an obstacle eval that'll have to be done, hopefully, where they address the height of the buildings versus safety zones around the airport. So my question to you guys is, A, is there any part of your cumulative process where you look at the location of this project in relation to the airport? And B, is there any requirement on the developer to share the results of the obstacle eval? Because the FAA is not going to come down here and enforce, you can't put these 50-foot tall buildings this close to an airport. That'll be on the developer to do something with that information. So do they have to share that with you? Because I've seen buildings go up near airports that were a problem.
So, so they can't waive any state or federal requirements. So if the FAA has requirements that do not allow a project like this to be sited near an airport, then it can't be. There's nothing, the zoning board cannot waive any state or federal requirements. With regard to receiving the data that they give to the FAA, they're not obligated to give it to the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals can ask for it. And if the developer doesn't give it to the zoning board, couldn't the zoning board ask the FAA for it?
I don't know.
It's a public record. I would think so. But again, anything to do with the FAA would be between the FAA and the applicant.
Okay. Feel free to ask me for that information once we find out that it's public and I can share it, because I will get a copy of the results of that. So, thanks.
Thank you, Tony. I know there's still questions. Come on up. We have so much time. And if you're thinking about it, someone else is for sure.
I don't have all the knowledge that some of these, I'm Janice Hobson, 4 Yacht Lane. Anyway, I don't have all the educated knowledge that some of these people got beforehand, but my big question is, who's going to pay for the road widening that I can't see how it won't have to be done? In the summertime, you're waiting maybe, I'm waiting maybe an hour on 130 doing go-home traffic to make a left-hand turn onto Pimlico Pond. And there's no light now that allows that to happen, but with the properties on either side of the road, it seems to me that it would be hard to widen the road much. Maybe a third turning lane. Do you all know who would have to pay? Would that be taxpayers' money after the study was done that pays for it, or would the project developers have to pay for some of that?
Amy, correct me if I'm wrong. If that is that's an issue, it's if traffic mitigation would be on the applicant.
Okay.
Correct. However, if we're talking about Route 130, that would be Mass Highway.
Actually, that section of Route 130 is town.
Okay, so they don't have to worry about going there. So, yeah, they could offer mitigation.
All right.
So,
And then Pimlico Pond Road is a narrow road. It's two lanes. So at the bottom, right beyond my neighborhood, is where these are going to be left-hand turns.
so the traffic study will, it looks at intersections, and intersections are given grades from A to F. And typically, if the project will drop the grade down, then they have to provide mitigation. If for some reason the traffic study shows that you have a D, your intersection is at a D level, and the development's going to keep it at a D level, we really can't force them to fix it because it's already at a bad level.
Oh, you can't force them to fix it.
Only if it doesn't move. So if you have an intersection that's at a B, and
I don't understand B and D.
A, B, C, D, E. So it's just like school.
I understand that.
So if an intersection is not so bad, it's a C, say.
Okay.
And if this project comes in and the traffic study shows that that intersection is not going to go down to a D or an E or an F, then there's really, the applicant wouldn't be required to do a lot of mitigation.
Okay.
But if that intersection is going to be impacted down to an F, they would have to mitigate that. Their traffic study should actually address that right away, but sometimes it doesn't, so we have to push them on that.
Yeah, and I'm with the other guy that hopes you do that study in the summertime. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Come on up, guys.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Moore. I live at 8 Checkerberry Lane. Just a couple things. What is the total number of bedrooms? Do we know?
Unfortunately, I don't know off the top of my head. I just know that I can get that to you as it was explained in the PEL. And
364, there's 360 units? 360 bedrooms, okay.
There can't be. There's 384 units. Okay. Okay. So 180 and 360 total. Okay. And as far as, I know that they can't speak to, they can't consider personnel needs later, but they can consider equipment. I mean, ultimately, when new equipment is needed, who pays for that? The taxpayers. Yes? Okay. And I remember, it's probably a long time ago now, but I know the fire department had wanted some additional equipment. I think it was maybe for night vision or something. And there was like a special assessment or an override or something. So would it be in the same vein as that they would ask for the taxpayers to pony up additional tax money for that equipment, do we think?
if
Like say they need, I mean, they're
no,
gonna,
yeah, no, as I understand, if they need, if they build a building that requires special equipment, it would be up to the developer.
to pay for it?
Yes.
Okay. And I know obviously, is there a way, and I don't think that there is, but is there a way to require some of the units to be owned versus rented? And what's the legal structure? Are they owned wholly like an apartment building as a single dwelling, or they're not condominiums or anything, are they?
They're not condominiums, and that's really up to the developer how they want to structure it. So ownership versus rental versus condoing. But the state does encourage 100% rental.
They encourage that?
Yes.
It's so strange to me because everything is, ownership. It's the American dream. Everyone should own their home. And there's all of these, Mass Housing does, they do the financial part of it. There's subsidized mortgages. There's all these things. HAC does. And it seems like an ownership form would be much better because then there would be some pride of ownership. Maybe, stability, you're not at your landlord's mercy. People would take care of it better, I feel. So I just didn't know if there was a way to require that, but clearly they, they don't encourage that. And then the last thing, is there, and I have not done any research as far as of this, but someone mentioned it, that there's some sort of safe harbor provision under 40B that the town can consider. I don't know if it's a substantial detriment or substantial harm to the town as a result of this. And I know, and again, you can't consider personnel, but as a whole, that perhaps the project is not going to benefit the town as much as hurt it?
No, there's no safe harbor for that. Just to clarify something is that if, for example, if it's going to be if it's going to be 50 feet tall, the building, and there is no fire apparatus that can reach the top of the building, the ZBA does not have to grant the waiver. And that could be upheld by HAC because there's a valid public need, there's a public safety need. Okay. It doesn't mean that they want to have 50 feet and then the town, Sandwich, has to buy a new fire truck. That's not the situation.
Okay.
So it all has to do with the waivers.
Okay. And I think just the last thing was obviously the concern with density is once you get a lot of people in a small amount of area, you have violence, you have now you're going to need a bigger police presence. And I don't know that legally all of it. Everything that development comes with, obviously, and I so understand the need for affordable housing for our teachers. I mean, I'm aware of people that, they work at Dunkin' Donuts and they live in their car. I mean, I get that. I just feel that there's maybe a better place or a way to manage it better because all of these units, say you have 500 bedrooms in this area, you're going to have violence, you're going to need more personnel, all of that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. We have time for one or two more. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Linda Haskins, 5 West Road, Forestdale. Linda Haskins, 5 West Road, Forestdale. This development's coming right up to my street. One thing, I remember the original development that went into receivership had something to do with open space for the town. Has that been mentioned in this application for this piece of property, that the town has any access to open space, or is this a totally new deal? I know it's a new deal, but I mean.
Yeah, I don't recall seeing that in their project eligibility applications.
Okay. My second thing is that whole PowerPoint presentation. The lawyer, your name, I'm sorry. Amy, thank you. It was great, but I mean, I'd have to sit and look through that. Again, is there going to be access for any of us? Can it be?
Well, this meeting is being recorded,
okay, good.
So you will,
watch it?
Yep, you'll be able to watch it over and again.
Well, specifically, there was a part that said something about uneconomic question where the development and the 40B requirements override safety, health requirements. Can you speak to that a little bit more specifically on that?
So no, safety, public safety and health are local concerns that we do not, that they have to follow. So the applicant or the developer cannot override public safety or health.
Right.
So, for example, for uneconomic, if the town had a fire truck, I keep using the height, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But if the town had a fire truck that clearly could reach the top of a 50-foot building, and the town said, we think this is too dense and you have to take off the top 2 floors, the developer will then claim that that condition is it's going to make the project uneconomic, or not granting the waiver up to 50 feet is going to make the project uneconomic.
Then what happens? Then the town loses, or?
Yes, then the developer appeals to the Housing Appeals Committee. The Housing Appeals Committee is very, very, very developer friendly.
Okay. Now, this might be an unfair question, but how do we find out where the town stands on this? Of course, the people who live right next door are going to be more invested in what happens with this property than people living in East Sandwich, over by the seaside, or whatever. But how do you get the feeling of what the town leaders are looking at this project? Oh boy, more taxes, more revenue, or is this going to be a headache? And if all of us and more people are against it, who has the final say? How can we mitigate maybe some of this volume? I mean, I'm all for housing too. It's unaffordable on Cape Cod for so many people, like the last person said, teachers and workers. I mean, I don't want to be, the Lake Tahoe of, the East Coast, but.
So I can't speak to the town and their opinions, but one of the things that I always tell my zoning boards is the best thing that you can do is work with the developer and get every aspect of the project peer reviewed. So one of the peer reviews that can be done is an architectural peer review, which will avoid possibly the buildings that we've seen that are not very attractive. That architectural peer review can also somewhat address density, figure out a way that maybe the project can be less dense, in a different configuration or something like that. So working with the developer and coming up with conditions is really the best way to mitigate a project such as this. To flat out deny a project such as this, they'll go to the HAC, the Housing Appeals Committee, and they will get approved.
Oh, no, I don't want to deny it. I just think it's.
Yeah, and I want to know if you had an opportunity, I believe it still may be on the town's website, the town's response, which was voted on by the selectmen,
Right.
expressing specific concerns with what was presented in the PEL. And again, those concerns are very similar to the ones that were expressed here: traffic, design, wastewater, and other regional impacts. So it puts that response letter, any response letter to a PEL, puts a makes a developer aware of what the conversation is going to be going into it, and then also as the process moves ahead, there is a public hearing. There's a public hearing, so people could come to that and express their concerns or support, whichever one there.
Right, that was going to be my next question, is to have all of us be aware of the next steps, or if this is a done deal,
No, it's far from a done deal. There's no application, so theoretically, technically, there's no deal on the table yet, so.
Okay.
So
I'll look to the town meetings, keep up with you guys. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate you donating your time.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much. That concludes our public comment time. We're going to wrap it up. Real quick, Joe.
Joe Silva from 30 Pioneer Drive. My concern is they have own property, waterfront on Peters Pond, and do they allowed later on if they want to have permits for docks and things like that? And, do you know the answer? If they can develop in that part, that waterfront.
So that's, according to the PEL, that's absolutely not part of the project, but if they wanted to do that in the future, they would need a permit from the Conservation Commission.
But it's all rented, so it's the owners is the ones then.
The owners would have to apply. Yep.
And I can see over 1,000 cars coming out of the, once all done, this project, just in one phase alone is 340 apartments, times 2 people, a couple married. Right there, 700 cars, it's just in one phase. So there's going to be a lot of cars. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
I think we're
Hold on, guys, 2 more minutes.
Just hang on. Okay. All right. I just wanna say that I just wanna understand that if you have any additional questions, comments, concerns, please write them on those cards that we gave you and put them in the basket at the back of the room before you leave. But I also want to, just before everybody gets up, just give me just a couple minutes to just kind of run through a couple of last things and what we can do moving forward, okay? I want to thank everyone that did approach the podium to share their questions and concerns. Your voice is important. Many town officials, the press is here, public, and those involved in this development are watching and listening because this is live and it's being recorded. So please know that people are listening to what you had to say. I also want to thank our panel again for volunteering their time. They did not require to become there, volunteered, so I just want to thank them very much for their expertise and their patience. I think we did learn a lot tonight, and it's been an honor to actually work with this panel. Thank you very much to you guys. I really appreciate it. I also just want to say, moving forward, the success of our Friends of Peters Pond organization depends on the financial support of our members and our citizens. And I want to just hand it off to Nancy to talk a little bit more about how you can help our association.
Thank you, Chris. Just a side note, we did invite several times the developers and their council to attend. And they chose not to attend at this time. Friends of Peters Pond is fundraising for operating expenses and most importantly for legal counsel, as our group has retained an attorney specializing in Massachusetts 40B law. FOP has a fundraising goal of $50,000 for a legal fund. To date, we have raised $15,000 thanks to the support of local citizens. You can donate by check or on our website, friendsofpeterspond.org. Friends of Peters Pond is a 501c3 organization, and we will provide you with a tax form when you donate. Please be sure to return your contact cards and pencils back to the basket as you exit. Thank you so much for coming out and attending. We really, from the bottom of our hearts, are just gladdened by seeing all of your faces here tonight, and we look forward to our next meeting. Be safe, happy holidays, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you.